Welcome to the Dark History Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Carter. In the heart of the district of Mecklenburg, Germany, nestled between woods and lakes, lay Ravensbrück, a concentration camp primarily for women, where one of the darkest chapters of human history unfolded. This was no ordinary prison. It was a place of macabre experiments, a living laboratory where the subjects were women of various nationalities, most of whom did not survive to tell their tale. Ravensbrück, established by the Nazis in 1939, would come to be known as a place of terror and death. By the time its gates were finally closed, it had claimed the lives of over 50,000 women. Each number tattooed on the inmates' arms concealed a harrowing story of unimaginable suffering, a testament to the human capacity for survival, even in the face of brutality beyond comprehension. Within these ominous walls, a group of physicians, under the guise of advancing medical knowledge, carried out a series of inhumane experiments. It was in Block 10 where these atrocities occurred, a place that would soon become synonymous with pain and terror. Doctors like Karl Gebhardt and Herta Oberhauser, among others, considered the women in their care less as patients and more as human guinea pigs, subjected to experiments that served no genuine medical purpose. It is essential to bear in mind that these were not isolated incidents, but rather a systematic, calculated effort that spanned years. The experiments ranged from the relatively benign, such as blood transfusions and the injection of various substances, to the truly horrific, like deliberately inflicting wounds to study the healing process. One of the most notorious experiments involved the transplantation of bones, muscles, and nerves. Women as young as 20 were deliberately crippled, their limbs cut open, and healthy bones, muscles, or nerves removed, only to be replaced with those from the deceased. The aim was to perfect the procedure for the benefit of injured German soldiers, but the cost was an unimaginable suffering for the victims. The experiments at Ravensbrück were not merely cruel, they were also scientifically useless. The methodology was flawed, the conditions uncontrolled, and the results often fabricated or exaggerated. But the value of these experiments was not in their scientific merit. It was in the terror they instilled, the dehumanization they achieved, and the power they represented. These atrocities, while unique in their horror, were not an anomaly in the Nazi regime. They were a part of a broader pattern of abuse and dehumanization. The horrors of Ravensbrück serve as a grim reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink under the guise of scientific progress and nationalistic fervor. It is a chapter of history that must never be forgotten, for it holds within it lessons about power, prejudice, and the human capacity for both evil and resilience. Located about 50 miles north of Berlin, Ravensbrück was primarily a concentration camp for women. It was established by Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer of the Schutzstaffel, commonly known as the SS, in 1939. Initially, the camp served as the final destination for those deemed politically undesirable by the Nazis, including communists, social democrats, Jehovah's Witnesses, and other so-called antisocial elements. These women were to be educated through forced labor. However, this soon escalated into a site of brutal medical experimentation. The camp was meticulously designed to maximize the efficiency of the SS's brutal regime. The layout reflected this calculated cruelty. It was a sprawling complex, featuring 32 barracks, each intended to house up to 250 prisoners. The reality, however, was much worse, with numbers often reaching quadruple the intended capacity. The camp was surrounded by a double electrified fence and watchtowers, ensuring that escape was a near impossibility. At the heart of the camp was the infamous Block 10. This was where the medical atrocities primarily took place. The block was deceptively ordinary from the outside, but inside it housed an operating room, sterilization facilities, and a laboratory. It was here that the SS doctors and their assistants carried out their grotesque experiments under the guise of scientific research. Among the SS doctors assigned to Ravensbrück was Herta Oberhauser. Her involvement in the experiments was particularly shocking given her status as one of the first women in Germany to hold a medical doctorate. She was directly involved in the bone, muscle, and nerve transplantation experiments, and she performed surgeries without anesthesia, resulting in unimaginable pain and suffering for the victims. Karl Gebhardt, another SS doctor, was instrumental in the sulfonamide experiments. These were intended to test the effectiveness of the drug in preventing and treating infections in battlefield wounds. The methodology involved deliberately inflicting wounds on the subjects, infecting them, and then treating some with sulfonamides while leaving others untreated as controls. The mortality rate for these experiments was exceedingly high, and those who survived were often left with permanent disabilities. These doctors, along with their colleagues, operated under the distorted belief that their actions were justified by their contribution to medical science and the preservation of the Aryan race. This twisted ideology underpinned the horrors perpetrated within the walls of Ravensbrück and across the Nazi concentration camp system. In this macabre parody of a medical facility, the doctors were free to act without oversight, their actions driven by a perverted interpretation of scientific exploration. The power structures at Ravensbrück were designed to protect and enable these acts. On top of the camp hierarchy was the commandant, Fritz Suren, who oversaw the camp's operations, including the medical block. Under Suren, the SS doctors had full autonomy within Block 10, their authority unquestioned by the other camp staff. Among the most influential figures in this gruesome medical hierarchy was SS Hauptsturmführer Dr. Percy Treite, the chief medical officer. Treite was responsible for coordinating the so-called medical activities within the camp, including the selection of prisoners for experimentation. He was known for his cold detachment, viewing the prisoners not as human beings, but as expendable subjects for their heinous experiments. The doctors were supported by a team of SS assistants, who were integral to the implementation of the experiments. These assistants were often recruited from the ranks of the prisoners themselves, forced to participate in the torture and mutilation of their fellow captives. These prisoner assistants, known as Funktionshäftlinge, were trapped in a horrifying dilemma: participate or face death themselves. Their role serves as a chilling reminder of the coercive power structures at play within the camp. Outside the camp, the actions of the doctors were supported by high-ranking Nazi officials, including Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer SS. Himmler took a keen interest in the experiments, seeing them as a crucial component of the Nazis' racial purity and eugenics program. His support provided further protection for the doctors, ensuring they could operate without fear of reprisal. The power structures within Ravensbrück were meticulously designed to facilitate these medical atrocities. The doctors, aided by a network of administrators, assistants, and high-ranking Nazi officials, were allowed to operate with impunity, their heinous acts shielded by the twisted ideology that drove the Nazi regime. The victims, on the other hand, were rendered utterly powerless, trapped within the confines of the camp and subjected to the whim of the doctors. The stark contrast of power in Ravensbrück is a chilling testament to the extent of human cruelty when unchecked by morality or empathy. The experiments conducted at Ravensbrück were of such a horrific nature that they defy comprehension. The majority of them were ordered by the SS with specific aims in mind: to advance the Nazi war effort, to test the limits of human endurance, and to further their perverse notions of racial superiority and eugenics. One notorious set of experiments involved the injection of various harmful substances into the bodies of the prisoners. These substances ranged from phenol, a toxic compound used to induce cardiac arrest, to bacteria such as tuberculosis and tetanus. The purpose was twofold. Firstly, to test the efficacy of these substances as potential biological weapons, and secondly, to understand the human body's response to such toxins. Another series of experiments focused on the forced sterilization of women. The Nazis had a morbid fascination with racial purity, and these experiments were part of their efforts to prevent the reproduction of those they deemed undesirable. The methods used were unspeakably cruel, involving invasive surgery performed without anesthesia and often resulting in severe complications, including death. Perhaps the most infamous experiments, however, were the so-called bone, muscle, and nerve regeneration and bone transplantation experiments, ordered by Himmler himself. In these, healthy women were deliberately wounded, with broken bones, amputations, and other severe injuries inflicted upon them. The doctors would then attempt to transplant bones, muscles, and nerves from one prisoner to another, or leave the wounds to fester to study the body's healing processes. This was done to simulate the injuries suffered by German soldiers on the front lines and to research new treatments for them. The prisoners subjected to these experiments were typically young Polish women, chosen for their youth and health. They became known as rabbits, a dehumanizing term alluding to their status as experimental subjects. The rabbits lived in constant fear, never knowing when they might be next to be taken to the experimentation block. The psychological torment they endured was an additional layer of torture, a cruel game played by their captors. The medical atrocities committed at Ravensbrück were not only a gross violation of medical ethics, but a profound betrayal of humanity. The doctors, who had sworn to do no harm, instead became agents of torture and death. Their actions serve as a stark reminder of the depths of depravity to which individuals can sink when shielded by a system that not only permits, but encourages such acts. As the war escalated, so too did the atrocities committed within the walls of Ravensbrück. The experimentation became more gruesome, the cruelty more palpable, the disregard for human life more pronounced. The camp's doctors, under the orders of their superiors, continued to push the boundaries of their inhumane experiments to the point where they began to resemble scenes from a horror film rather than a medical facility. The hunger experiments were a particularly brutal example of this. Women were starved to the brink of death, their bodies ravaged by malnutrition, in an attempt to determine the minimum calories needed for the human body to survive. The doctors observed as these women's bodies slowly deteriorated, recording the effects of starvation in disturbing detail. It was a slow, agonizing death for those subjected to it, and a horrifying spectacle for those forced to watch. Another series of experiments involved the testing of sulfonamide, an early antibiotic. These were conducted under the guise of finding a treatment for gangrene and other battlefield infections. In reality, the experiments were a brutal melange of torture and disfigurement. The doctors would inflict horrific wounds on their subjects, often by amputating limbs without anesthesia, then deliberately infect the wounds with bacteria such as streptococcus, tetanus, and gas gangrene. Then, they would treat the infections with sulfonamide, observing the effects on the victim's decaying flesh. Even more chilling were the freezing experiments. In these, women were immersed in ice-cold water or exposed to sub-zero temperatures until they lost consciousness or even died. The aim was to discover the most effective ways of warming German pilots who had been downed in the North Sea. The women's bodies would be re-warmed using various methods, including forcing them to have sexual intercourse with camp guards. It was an exercise in barbarism, disguised as scientific research. Among all these horrors, one figure stands out as particularly abhorrent. Dr. Karl Gebhardt, a close associate of Himmler, was one of the main perpetrators of the medical experiments at Ravensbrück. He was responsible for much of the bone grafting and sulfonamide testing, and his ruthless pursuit of scientific progress caused untold suffering. The women of Ravensbrück were not only victims of the Nazis' genocidal policies, but also their perverse medical curiosity. Their bodies were treated as mere objects for experimentation, their lives deemed expendable in the pursuit of a warped ideology. This was the reality of Ravensbrück, a place where the line between medicine and torture was not just blurred, it was obliterated. Within this nightmare, however, flickers of human spirit remained unextinguished. The women of Ravensbrück exhibited incredible bravery and resistance in the face of their captors and the grotesque experiments they were subjected to. They found ways to resist, to hold on to their humanity amidst the inhumanity that surrounded them. One such act of resistance was silence, not the silence of submission, but the silence of defiance. The women took an oath of secrecy, vowing not to divulge any information about the experiments to their tormentors, no matter the torture they might endure. It was a pact of solidarity, a refusal to participate in their own dehumanization. This silent resistance was not passive. It was an active refusal to cooperate, to provide the Nazis with the satisfaction of their screams or the validation of their research. Instead, the women bore their pain in silence, their quiet defiance a testament to their strength and resilience. They refused to be reduced to mere specimens, maintaining their dignity in the face of unimaginable cruelty. In addition to silence, there were other forms of resistance. Some women managed to smuggle out notes detailing the atrocities committed in the camp, hoping to alert the world to the horrors of Ravensbrück. Others sabotaged the experiments in subtle ways, feigning symptoms or altering results, in an effort to undermine the research. One such woman was Polish political prisoner Wanda Poltawska. Subjected to the brutal bone-grafting experiments, Poltawska used her background in medicine to mislead her captors, falsifying the progress of her treatment. Her actions not only disrupted the experiments but also saved her own life. And then there were those who resisted through sheer force of will, refusing to let the Nazis break their spirit. These women drew on their inner strength, their faith, their love for each other, to endure the unendurable. They clung to their humanity, even as their captors tried to strip it away. The resistance of the women of Ravensbrück was not just about survival. It was about maintaining their identity, their dignity, their humanity in the face of an ideology that sought to erase them. It was an act of defiance, a refusal to be reduced to mere objects of experimentation. Through their silence, their subterfuge, their unyielding spirit, they resisted. They defied. They survived. In the heart of darkness, they shone a light on the indomitable human spirit, a beacon of hope amidst the atrocities of Ravensbrück. Yet the horrors of Ravensbrück remained largely hidden from the world until the final months of the war. In early 1945, as Allied forces advanced, the SS began to evacuate the camp, forcing thousands of women on brutal death marches. These marches were intended to eliminate evidence of the crimes committed at Ravensbrück, a final act of inhumanity in the face of impending defeat. However, some of the women managed to survive these death marches, and their testimonies would become crucial in revealing the truth about Ravensbrück. One such survivor was French resistance fighter Germaine Tillion. Despite enduring years of physical and psychological torture, Tillion remained determined to document the atrocities she had witnessed. In the chaos of the evacuation, she managed to smuggle out a secret diary in which she meticulously recorded the details of the experiments, the names of the victims, and the identities of the perpetrators. This diary would serve as one of the first and most comprehensive accounts of the medical atrocities at Ravensbrück. Tillion's testimony, along with those of other survivors, was vital in exposing the full extent of the Nazis' crimes. As the world learned of the horrors of Ravensbrück, there was widespread shock and outrage. The medical atrocities perpetrated by the Nazis were condemned as a gross violation of human rights and medical ethics. In the aftermath of the war, several of the doctors responsible for the experiments at Ravensbrück were tried and convicted at the Nuremberg trials. They were found guilty of crimes against humanity and were sentenced to death or life imprisonment. The testimonies of the Ravensbrück survivors played a crucial role in these convictions. They provided incontrovertible evidence of the crimes committed, ensuring that those responsible were held accountable. The exposure and documentation of the medical atrocities at Ravensbrück are a testament to the courage and resilience of the women who survived. Despite the unimaginable suffering they endured, they refused to be silenced. Their voices, once suppressed, now rang out loud and clear, bearing witness to the horrors they had endured and demanding justice for their suffering. Their testimonies stand as a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, but also of the indomitable human spirit, of the power of truth and the pursuit of justice. The story of Ravensbrück is one of darkness and despair, but also of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. In the years following the trials, the survivors of Ravensbrück continued to bear witness to their experiences, ensuring that the world would never forget the horrors they had endured. Their testimonies have been instrumental in shaping our understanding of the Nazi regime's crimes, the extent of the medical atrocities committed, and the depths of human cruelty. But while the Nuremberg trials brought some measure of justice, the question of reparations for the victims of the experiments has been a contentious issue. Despite the physical and psychological scars left by the experiments, many of the survivors received little to no compensation for their suffering. Only in recent years has there been a push for further reparation and recognition of the victims. The story of Ravensbrück also raises profound questions about the nature of medical ethics and the responsibility of doctors. The doctors who conducted the experiments were not outliers or anomalies. They were trained professionals who had taken the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, yet they used their skills and knowledge to inflict unimaginable suffering. The medical atrocities at Ravensbrück highlight the potential for medicine to be weaponized when it is untethered from ethical constraints. In the wake of Ravensbrück, the world was forced to confront the reality of what had happened. This led to a significant shift in international law and the establishment of new guidelines for medical research. The Nuremberg Code, formulated in response to the trials, laid out the principles of ethical medical research, including the necessity of informed consent. The horrors of Ravensbrück served as a stark reminder of the need for stringent ethical guidelines in medical practice and research. The legacy of Ravensbrück is a complex and painful one. It is a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can descend, of the potential for cruelty and inhumanity that resides in us all. Yet it is also a testament to the resilience and courage of the women who survived, who bore witness to their experiences and fought for justice. Their stories remind us of the indomitable spirit of humanity, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. They compel us to remember, to learn from the past, and to strive for a world where such atrocities can never happen again. The enduring legacy of Ravensbrück is not confined to the annals of history. It reverberates through our contemporary world in a multitude of ways. The brutal experiments conducted there have had a profound impact on the collective consciousness, shaping our understanding of the perils of unchecked power, the fragility of ethical boundaries, and the imperative of preserving human dignity. The atrocities committed at Ravensbrück have informed and influenced a range of disciplines, from law to bioethics, from medicine to psychology. They have forced us to grapple with the ethical dimensions of scientific research, compelling a redefinition of what is permissible in the pursuit of knowledge. They have underpinned the creation of stringent ethical guidelines for clinical trials and medical research, regulations that strive to ensure that the sanctity of human life and dignity are never again compromised in the name of science. In the legal sphere, the Nuremberg trials and the subsequent establishment of the Nuremberg Code marked a fundamental shift in international law, setting a precedent for the prosecution of crimes against humanity. The lessons learned from Ravensbrück have been instrumental in shaping the legal framework for dealing with war crimes and human rights violations in conflicts that followed, from the Balkans to Rwanda, from Cambodia to Syria. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Ravensbrück is found in the lives of the survivors and their families. Their resilience and courage, their determination not to be defined by their victimhood, their commitment to bearing witness and seeking justice, have proved a powerful testament to the human spirit. Their stories have inspired countless books, films, and artworks, contributing to a broader cultural narrative that seeks to confront and come to terms with the horrors of the past. At the same time, the story of Ravensbrück continues to serve as a stark warning, a reminder of the dangers of intolerance, dehumanization, and the abuse of power. It underscores the constant need for vigilance and resistance in the face of hate, prejudice, and aggression. Consequently, Ravensbrück stands as a symbol of both humanity's darkest tendencies and its capacity for resilience, courage, and justice. Its memory challenges us, haunts us, and implores us to strive for a world where such horrors are consigned to the past. It is a legacy that we carry with us, a legacy that we must never forget. Even with the passage of time, the atrocities committed at Ravensbrück continue to raise questions about the nature of evil, about humanity's capacity for cruelty, and about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable suffering. They force us to question the ethical boundaries of scientific exploration and the moral responsibility of those who wield power. The mystery of the Ravensbrück experiments also lingers. How did the doctors involved reconcile their Hippocratic oath, their commitment to healing, with the cruel experiments they performed? How did ordinary men and women become complicit in such horrific acts? And why were some of the medical personnel at Ravensbrück never held accountable for their crimes? These are questions that may never be fully answered, yet they demand our attention. They compel us to examine the darkest corners of our history, to confront the uncomfortable truths about our capacity for inhumanity, and to strive to prevent such atrocities from happening again. The survivors of Ravensbrück have left us with a powerful legacy of resilience and resistance. Their stories remind us that even in the darkest times, there is the potential for courage and compassion, for strength and survival. They challenge us to remember, to bear witness, to learn from the past, and to strive for justice. Yet, remembering Ravensbrück is not just about honoring the past. It is about understanding the present and shaping the future. It is about recognizing the enduring impacts of trauma, the insidious nature of hate, and the dangers of indifference. It is about acknowledging our collective responsibility to uphold the principles of human rights, dignity, and justice. The memory of Ravensbrück is a call to action. It is a reminder that we must remain vigilant against the forces of intolerance and dehumanization. It urges us to challenge prejudice, to resist the abuse of power, and to fight for a world where the principles of compassion, respect, and justice prevail. The legacy of Ravensbrück is a testament to humanity's capacity for both evil and good. It is a stark reminder of our past, a mirror reflecting our present, and a beacon guiding us towards a more just and humane future. As we reflect on the horrors of Ravensbrück, let us remember not just the victims and survivors, but the lessons they have taught us. Let these lessons inspire us, guide us, and challenge us to build a world free from hate, prejudice, and cruelty. A world where the horrors of Ravensbrück remain firmly in the past, never to be repeated. Thanks for listening. This has been the Dark History Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.